I'm Jeff Butler of the Butler Law Firm. A lot of people wonder what compensation they're entitled to after a car accident, whether that comes through a car accident settlement or a verdict after trial. We get questions like, what are the damages in a car accident? How do you determine damages after a car accident? Who pays for damages after a car accident? How to claim damages from a car accident? Who is responsible for damages in a car accident? So today, we'll talk about that, damages following a car accident. We'll talk about 5 different types of compensation that people who've been hurt in an accident that wasn't their fault are entitled to. And that's not going to be an exhaustive list. You could describe the different types in many, many different ways. We'll focus on 5 today. And then we'll talk about 2 things to keep in mind as you think about and work through damages in a car accident case. The thing we'll start with for types of compensation is one that I think most people are already familiar with. And that's medical bills. There's 2 things to think about, though, that most people aren't aware of. First, if the injury is serious, this is past and future medical bills. Often, if an injury is serious enough, you've got the initial medical bills from the emergency room, maybe the orthopedist, maybe a neurologist. But if you're looking at ongoing care or other things that have to be done, like future surgeries that appear to be likely, or in-home nursing care, or modifications that have to be made to a house to accommodate someone who's in a wheelchair now, those are future bills. And the medical bills that can be collected or that a victim should be compensated for after an accident include both the past and the future medical bills. Another thing that a lot of folks don't think about is that here in Georgia we have the collateral source rule, which is an old legal rule going back, I think, for centuries, certainly for longer than I've been alive. And what that means is that just because the person who was hurt in a collision was smart enough to have medical insurance and then didn't have to pay the whole bills personally, that person still has the right to collect the full medical bills. In other words, the person who caused the collision or that person's insurance company doesn't get to pay less just because the victim was smart enough to have insurance. That's called the collateral source rule. So when we talk about compensation, we're interested in what we call the full sticker price or the full medical bill, even if insurance covered part of it. And that's important to our clients because often at the end of the case, the insurance company that paid for those medical bills will come knocking and they'll want to be paid back some or all of what they paid. So it's important on the front end to realize that you can collect and should collect the full sticker price, the full amount before insurance paid anything for past and future medical bills. The next type we'll talk about is this. Pain and suffering. I think most people have heard about pain and suffering too. Another one thing that you may not realize is that this is also past and future pain and suffering. If you've been in a collision and a bone was broken, then you were probably in excruciating pain for a lengthy period until they got you to the hospital, stabilized you, and got whatever kind of painkillers they gave you into your system. And then you also have been in pain by the time we get going on the lawsuit in the recovery process. For instance, physical therapy hurts really badly. That typically is past pain and suffering to which a victim is entitled, or for which a victim is entitled to compensation. But if the injuries are serious, then there's also future pain and suffering. It's going to hurt in the future. If you end up with hardware installed in your body, that's going to hurt. You may know every time it's going to rain, for example. And if you're going to experience pain in the future from your existing injuries, from the surgical intervention, from future surgeries, or just because the pain can't really ever be taken away, as with most spinal injuries, then you're entitled to compensation for that future pain and suffering as well. The next type I think most people have also probably already heard of, and that's lost earnings. If you have to miss work and can't earn money like you normally would as a result of an accident, you're entitled to compensation for that. Another is this. Mental anguish. Now, some people see something like mental anguish and think, come on, that sounds like it's too much. That sounds like nonsense associated with frivolous lawsuits and all these other things. I think about reconsidering that. There are cases where the mental anguish is a really serious component of damages. That's particularly true when someone else is hurt. For example, there are plenty of car accidents where there's a collision, and imagine it's a husband and wife. If the husband is killed and the wife survives, she goes through a lot of mental anguish as a result of that collision. Sometimes people have to watch others be injured. In fire cases, sometimes people hear someone else burning inside the car. And you can imagine how that affects someone. Mental anguish can be real, and when it is, that's a basis for damages. The last that we'll talk about takes me a little while to write, so hang on. The last is interference with daily living, and that phrase comes right out of Georgia's pattern jury instructions. That is to say, at the end of a trial, the language that the judge typically reads to the jury to say what kind of damages can be awarded. And I like this legal phrase because it's pretty good. It describes pretty simply what it's talking about. And it's the way that injuries affect you in the past and again in the future. For example, if you have a spinal injury, that probably interferes with your sleep because you're waking up in pain in the middle of the night. It probably interferes with your job. If you have a desk job like me and you sit all day, then having an injury to one of the discs in your spine is going to hurt, and it's going to require you to get up and move around. You're going to have problems to deal with that you didn't before. Other injuries can affect the way we do simple things. We handled a case for a young woman who lost part of her leg, and it affects everything: the way she showers, the way she walks, the way she can exercise. In other words, it interferes with daily living, and that is an element of damages. Now, in terms, you can find other ways, and there are other legal phrases to express these same concepts, but these 5 concepts basically explain in a personal injury or car accident case what kind of damages are available. There are some things to keep in mind as you consider this topic, and one of them is that the limitation on what can be recovered may not be how bad someone's hurt, what their medical bills are, the pain they've experienced, the way the injuries interfere with their daily living. Sometimes the limitation on recovery, unfortunately, is the amount of available insurance. There are times where a car accident is severe, someone can be killed. But if there's not much insurance, and as is usually the case, the at-fault driver doesn't have significant assets, the limitation on recovery isn't all of these things. Sometimes the limitation, unfortunately, is the amount of available insurance. And this is where actually a good lawyer can come in really handy, because we can often find pockets of insurance that you didn't know existed. We've made other videos about this, but we'll often find UM insurance that clients didn't know they had. Just recently, we settled a case for $1.25 million when there was when that was 2 insurance policies, and one of them was a $1 million umbrella policy that the insurance company didn't want to tell us about and that nobody knew existed until we went and found it. So good lawyers can make a big difference. In that case, we made $1 million worth of difference. And the next thing to keep in mind is this. In a personal injury case, including one following a car accident, the damages are the compensation is almost always given all at once. So there's just going to be one sum that handles all of these different things. You don't end up getting like a check for your medical bills, then another for pain or suffering, another for lost earnings. And when you do settle a case or try it and get a verdict, which is a jury decision on the case, typically there's not different line items for these different things. There's just one final sum that includes everything you're entitled to. One final sum in the personal injury settlement or in the personal injury verdict that is designed to compensate the injured person for all that they've been through. Thanks.